Today, I'm joined by Jonathan Puleio. He's Global Vice President at Humanscale, and he's also a professional ergonomist at this present time when lots of people are working from home, probably instead of in an office, they're in their bedroom or something like that. And even when people are in their offices, nearly over half the people have some sort of musculoskeletal discomfort. But now we're all at home, Jonathan, and surely problems are going to be even greater, aren't they?
Absolutely. And that's being driven fundamentally by how poorly designed home workstations typically are. In a traditional office environment, people have the luxury of things like adjustable chairs and monitors that are often on articulating arms. In the US, they might even have a keyboard support or a footrest to support their feet. The moment we move into a home setting, these work tools that we know of, are very important for minimizing risk and lowering risk of injury, all but disappear. And then to compound things, we have a lot of creative setups, everything from people sitting on their couches and sofas to sitting at dining room tables or even high counters in kitchen environments. So the conditions, unfortunately, are certainly such that we would expect discomfort rates to increase dramatically, specifically in the home.
Probably everybody who is going to watch this will be now spending a lot more time in front of their computer at home. So what advice would you give them specifically as to how to lay out their office space in their home?
Well, there's a few things that folks can do with really no cost. Very practical solutions to achieve a better working posture. Starting with the chair, you just want to make sure that your feet are firmly planted on something. And if they're not firmly planted on the floor, well, there's a lot of cost-effective alternatives. It could be a box or a stack of books. Anything that would bridge the gap will make a very significant difference in the user's overall seated comfort. And then there's a lot of other quick fixes. If you're sitting on a completely non-adjustable chair and you find that the seat pan is too deep, let's say, so the front edge of the seat pan is sort of digging into the back of the knees, well, you could very quickly fashion or somehow attach a pillow to the backrest, effectively pushing the user forward. That's a very inexpensive way of potentially solving that problem. If you're sitting in a chair that has a straight back, our backs are curved. There are ways of changing the curvature of the backrest. It could be simply taking a towel and rolling the towel, binding it by rubber bands, for instance, and then figuring out a way to attach it somehow to the backrest of the chair. And it's a very cost-effective lumbar support. One of the problems in the home is many of us are using laptops. And the problem with the laptop is that the monitor and the keyboard are attached. So either the keyboard is too high or the monitor is too low, or both problems at the same time. The ideal position for the hands is such that the keyboard is basically in your lap. Right? If you think about when you're relaxing in a chair, you'd be much more likely to have your hands at rest, very close to your thighs, with your shoulders relaxed, your elbows at your side. Clearly, by placing the laptop in your lap, you really compromise the monitor position. So one solution around this is simply to position the laptop on a box or a stack of books to get the monitor at the right position, and then just try to source an inexpensive set of input devices, keyboard and mouse, so that you can kind of separate the keyboard from the monitor. Very, very low cost and an effective way to change some of these relationships. So those are some of the basics that I would recommend. And actually, if I could add one more, is just this notion of not sitting still, moving, varying your posture as much as possible. I really like the idea of taking phone calls standing up, if that's a possibility, depending on what you're doing. any excuse to break up periods of prolonged static postures are highly recommended.
So I think you're absolutely right. Somebody described sitting in Zoom meetings all day as a bit like being on a long haul flight. And you, at the end of the day, you came out feeling just as you do getting off an aeroplane. But I guess that we are looking at probably spending more time at home in future. We've got used to new technology very quickly, I think a lot of people, and we'll be looking with social and physical distancing. We're going to be looking at probably spending more time at work as we share the office space. So how would you then advise people now to really think seriously about redesigning their space at home?
I think that's very interesting. And I think you're absolutely right. This pandemic has long-term implications with respect to how residential space is designed long-term. And typically, if you're lucky, a home might have one small office space. Well, what if you have multiple at-home workers? And think about all the challenges that raises. So I would not be surprised if, as a design brief, a home office becomes paramount in the design of new construction. I can also see a lot of scenarios where spare bedrooms are converted into makeshift offices in the short term. In long term, it could be that every home has office environment built in with considerations for lighting and acoustics and connectivity and so forth. So the other interesting point here is I think a lot of this at work behavior will remain even after the virus subsides from our population. There's some unique benefits to working from home, the lack of a commute, the lack of repeated distractions and interruptions. We're going to find that a lot of companies that have productivity measures in place are going to find that their at-home work population actually fared pretty well. Combine that with the fact that I think people will actually have a positive experience and report perhaps even higher job satisfaction. These things might stick. Whereas this was potentially much more difficult 10 years ago, when perhaps connectivity was not the same, the video conferencing platforms were, and technology plays a huge role in our ability to do this effectively. But I think the days of having everyone report into an office, they might be challenged at this point.
Yeah, I think everyone who is in the service industry or is able to work from home and communicate like this, if you're in manufacturing, it's not quite the same. But we're very lucky to be able to keep our businesses going, I think, during a time like this. As you say, 10, 15 years ago, it would have been a very different world. But that's been very helpful advice, Jonathan. But just before we go, tell me a little bit more about Humanscale.
Humanscale is a designer and manufacturer of ergonomic work tools. It has its origins in the early 80s. Company actually started as designing eye protection filters when, back in the late 80s, early 90s, the monochromatic monitors were very challenging to read. And from success in that area, the company evolved to take on other work-related challenges, postural issues regarding, hands and wrists and monitor positioning. And in the late 90s, got involved in seating. And then in the early 2000s, sit-stand work environments. So the company has just evolved to be really a full-service ergonomic solutions provider. And we also have a robust consulting division that's the part of the organization that I represent, where we actually help companies design, implement, and manage ergonomics programs.
Thank you very much for telling us how to work comfortably from home. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.